Joining me now is Andrew Romanoff. He is the former Speaker of the House in Colorado, and he is running for Senate in this election. Andrew, welcome to the Young Turks.
Thanks a lot, Cenk. I appreciate it. I want you to know I got a new shirt for this occasion, but there are no firearms concealed in any part of my clothing.
That's right. So, Andrew, you were in great position here as the race was unfolding. Cory Gardner, the Republican incumbent, is deeply unpopular, completely tied to Donald Trump. You're both, a politician that has roots in Colorado and has had great success there, and among certainly the most progressive candidates. So then here comes John Hickenlooper, and he dropped out of the presidential race. And now has joined this Senate run in your primary. A lot of people in the Democratic Party and some in the media, I don't know why they have a dog in the fight, have said that all of you should drop out to give Hickenlooper the nomination. What's your response to that?
Well, that's pretty laughable. I mean, that's not the way a democracy works. I recognize that Washington has made its choice in this election, and that's nice. They don't actually get to vote here. They just act that way. We've gotten endorsements now from 300 elected officials across the state, county commissioners, mayors, school board members, city council members, legislators, folks who actually want to help fight for a Green New Deal and Medicare for all and an economy that works for everyone. That's why I'm running. And while I respect John Hickenlooper and Cory Gardner for that matter, we have fundamental differences in this election, and that is what an election's for.
So look, the idea is Hickenlooper's was of course mayor of Denver and then was governor of Colorado a couple of times. So they say he could win in that state. Is that a little panicked and is that a little outdated? So it makes it seem like you could only win in Colorado if you run towards the Republicans. So I want to get your take on that.
Yeah, look, if you look at the most recent polling, it'll show you that a generic Democrat leads Cory Gardner by about 10 points. This is not a blue state or a red state. It is a profoundly purple place. But I believe the best way to beat Cory Gardner is to offer a clear alternative, to show folks not just who you're running against, but what you're fighting for. We face, as you know, Cenk, an existential crisis in the form of this climate catastrophe. We have run out the clock on incremental reform. Baby steps aren't going to do the trick. That's why I support a Green New Deal. I ran a mental health organization for the last 10 years fighting insurance companies that were depriving their customers of the coverage they were entitled to. So I'm not interested in watching more Americans struggle or suffer or die on account of a business model that benefits by the number of claims that can exclude. That's why I support a program of Medicare for all. Governor Hickenlooper and I disagree on that issue as well.
So Governor Hickenlooper says that he actually compared it to Stalin.
Outrageous.
And he said that you might as well airmail the presidency to Donald Trump, that if you argue on that on the presidential level. Yet he seemed to finish his campaign somewhat near 0%. So look, we call ourselves homo progressives. We're super proud to be progressive, and we don't hide it. But I'm curious what your reaction is in terms of the rest of the media in Colorado. Do they look at Hickenlooper polling at 0% at the presidential level and go, nailed it? He's clearly the guy who can beat Cory Gardner?
Now, I don't know that there's been a great deal of coverage in this race, although the national media has been focused obviously on the DSCC's choice. And I represented Colorado on the Democratic National Committee. At the time, the party took the view that it should not meddle in primaries. It actually respected the rights of voters in our state and every other state to pick a nominee. I think a lot of folks in Colorado tell me, whether they're endorsing my campaign or not, that they want to be able to cast a ballot in this race rather than have the party bosses or power brokers in Washington declare this primary over 10 months before the people of Colorado have actually had a chance to weigh in.
So Andrew, you just said you're for Medicare for all, and you talked about climate change. What's your point of view on Green New Deal?
Yeah, I support it because I think it is literally our last best chance to rescue the planet. If we do not end our reliance on fossil fuel and accelerate our transition to a clean energy economy, we will condemn our children and grandchildren to a world in which floods and storms and wildfires and droughts and heat waves like this one become even more frequent and more destructive, in a world in which millions of people are already being turned into climate refugees and hundreds of millions more will be forced to flee their homes. That's not the world I want for anyone. And we can do something about that. In fact, in Colorado, we're showing that you can grow the economy and protect the environment at the same time. I wish with all my heart that Cory Gardner would use the seat he holds now on the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee to act on this climate crisis. He won't, he hasn't, in large part because he owes that seat to the fossil fuel industry, the very industry he's supposed to be regulating.
So the website is andrewromanoff.com. Whenever you're watching an interview on the Young Turks, you'll be able to find the links down below on YouTube and Facebook, and you can just click on them to donate, to volunteer, etc. Andrew, that leads me to money in politics. So do you take corporate PAC money?
I don't. No. In fact, I met with a group from the Sunrise Movement just a couple days ago to make it clear that we're not only rejecting PAC money, we're rejecting contributions from the fossil fuel industry. The truth is, these special interest groups have enough politicians on their payroll. And one of the reasons, as you know, Cenk, that we haven't gotten the healthcare reform we need, the climate action we need, or any of the fundamental changes we need is because we have allowed corporate cash to flood this system and corrupt democracy itself. It's also one of the reasons that so many Americans have given up on participating in this process. You look at the US Senate, and you might as well see a sign that says, only millionaires need apply. Look, I'm not a millionaire, but I figure if a guy like me can win a race like this without all that corporate cash, our victory itself will send a shockwave to a town that needs one. And when we win, another candidate will take the same approach. And when she wins, another candidate will follow suit. And eventually, we can build a critical mass of senators and representatives who owe their seats to their constituents, not to their corporate contributors.
So would you be in favor of an amendment that ends private financing of election and makes public financing the law of the land?
I would support an amendment that not only reverses the Supreme Court decision in Citizens United that defines corporations as people, but also the earlier decision in Buckley versus Vallejo that defines money as speech. I think if we don't make those fundamental changes and adopt, as you're suggesting, a system of public financing, we'll continue to indulge a system that simply sells Senate seats and other public offices to the highest bidder. We've got the best government money can buy. It's just not a government that's working terribly well for the rest of us.
Look, I think anyone in this race is going to beat Cory Gardner with a stick. He's already he's already down 10 points to the generic Democrat, as you mentioned. He's completely tied to Donald Trump,
Yes.
and Donald Trump is deeply unpopular in Colorado. So the question is, what kind of senator does Colorado want, and can you win the primary? So what's your strategy for overcoming the, in my opinion, and I think you'll see it play out, unfortunately, the giant media advantage that John Hickenlooper will have in the media backing him as the more credible candidate?
Look, we're not going to have the most money in this race. We're just going to try to get the most people. So we are encouraging folks, as you did, to sign on at andrewromanoff.com, to contribute, to volunteer. Come to Colorado. It's a beautiful place. We're building a grassroots army all across the state. It's a bit of a Rocky Mountain rebellion because we're not interested in taking marching orders from the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee or anybody else in Washington. And I think if we do that, if we continue to hold the house parties, the meet and greet events, we'll not only present a sharp contrast from Cory Gardner, who hasn't held a town hall meeting in 2 years, we'll also build the kind of coalition we need to win. And you're exactly right, Cenk. While I support flipping this seat from red to blue, the most important thing we can do is flip the Senate from paralysis to progress. And the only way to do that is to make sure that we elect Democrats with the courage of our convictions, who are willing to fight for the progressive priorities we share. That's why I'm running for this seat.
So, Representative Romanoff, when you get into the Senate, if you do, you will have your so-called colleagues apply a tremendous amount of pressure to you. They'll say, hey, listen, Andrew, all that talk of the corruption and getting the money from the fossil fuel industry, you got to cut that out. It's going to offend your colleagues because half of them take fossil fuel money, and you don't want to be impolite to them. So, but you joke, you laugh, but that is literally what will happen, and they will apply a tremendous amount of pressure. They'll say you're going to hurt the Democratic Party if you point out that we're also getting money from these industries. So how will you respond to that?
You're entirely right. I take the premise, and you're right. That's the way this country club in Washington works. I'm not interested in settling in or joining the Senate cloakroom. I'm not running for the U.S. Senate for the groupies or the glory. Somebody told me once there are two kinds of politicians in the world: those who want to be somebody and those who want to do something. I'm running for the US Senate because I want to get something done. I joined this race because I think you and I are literally running out of time to rescue our planet, repair our democracy, and restore the American dream. And I am not content to stand by while the country is torn apart, while the planet is literally on fire, and while folks like Cory Gardner just whistle through the wreckage. I'll owe my seat to the people of Colorado, pretty clearly, not to the party bosses or the power brokers or the corporate PACs in DC.
All right, Andrew Romanoff running for the United States Senate in the state of Colorado. Thank you for joining us on the Young Turks. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Cenk. I appreciate it.